Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, October 14th, 2024. Time to begin the week anew. Time to begin the year anew if you're into the whole Hebrew calendar. Although that was actually a week ago. And but now you're all repentant of it. And I just repented of that mistake. And so here you go. It says Eastern Hasidic Orthodox New Year. Not really. Okay, we're back on the air with plenty to round up from the weekend. Greg Dworkin will be with us after a slightly extended absence, having been out on Thursday, so there's plenty more news to round up. And I don't know, let's see. I would guess the news from the end of the weekend into Monday morning in social media circles appears to be that, you know, as usual, and I mean, as expected, ironically, this is the predictability of Donald Trump, I guess. He spent the weekend doing more Hitler fascism and telling more groups of people that he would, murder them or order armed militias to murder them or round them up in camps or deport them / disappear them, whatever, all the normal stuff. And I guess we're all, I don't know, maybe we're all in some ways guilty of just waking up and going on about our business while a major party candidate who's apparently something like a coin toss away from the presidency threatens these things. I don't know really how else you deal with it. Although, apparently, some other people have decided that they'll deal with it by, I guess, roaming free in the neighborhood where he's giving rallies with weapons. But as you know, Republicans have been pushing for years to allow people to roam around free all over the place with weapons. And I guess as a result, you can be arrested on your way, it sounds like, it's unclear to me what the reporting now says, but on your way to a Trump rally with weapons in your car, and you tell the cops that you have weapons in your car, and you can be out on bail like later the same day. So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon as well. But I think what most people seem to be talking about this morning is, one, how commonplace that is, and two, that although all of this is going on and everywhere that Trump appears, he, with a few exceptions, he makes these kinds of terroristic, fascistic threats. If you picked up the New York Times or Washington Post at the newsstand or off your front door in the morning and opened it up to see what the news was from Monday, you would not see any real sign of that happening. Certainly not on the front page. And, that's a major issue for people. I can understand why. So, we can help round up that news and let you know what's going on. I've neglected to search through the Rafto stories to see whether there are video clips that I'm supposed to be loading up. So I guess we'll have to do that on the fly if that's the case. But we'll catch up with Greg on it. And I was going to say in a few minutes, but how about right now? This is no time like the present. I don't know. I'm trying to think through that. Was there really no time like the present? 1930s Germany was a little bit like the present, I guess. But, worse hair, I think we have now in our leader. All right. Well, our putative leader, at any rate. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine.
Like every
professional podcaster. I didn't hear your introduction because I was getting the laundry ready.
Oh, okay. I was like, in a minute or two we'll talk to Greg Dworkin. Ring. Okay. I guess he's listening. No.
Well, I thought that was my cue, and then just as I call in, you say, "But this gives me a good time to talk." Well,
no, not really. It doesn't give me a good time to do this. I was wondering. Was I supposed to load up any clips today? And I don't know, but we'll get to it if necessary.
Well, let's do some lightning round stuff.
Okay.
Speaking of not seeing anything, this is top German neo-Nazi plummets 200 feet to death while hiking on Hitler's favorite mountain. That's from the New York Post.
Yeah, I saw that one on
a wonderful message.
Friday.
A.R. Moxon writes, top German neo-Nazi becomes bottom German neo-Nazi after very briefly becoming fastest German neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
I had to talk about the kind of impact this guy had.
I had just, gone with the throwaway line of, well, now it's my favorite mountain.
Yeah, Bavaria, if you're wondering. This is a Bavarian guy. So, Germany is still Germany, but still. That's worth a lightning round mention. You mentioned also the man arrested for allegedly having 2 unregistered loaded guns near a Trump event this weekend says he's a Trump supporter, has been helping with the re-elect, and he was invited to the rally.
Right, and January 6th, probably.
Yeah, probably.
I was invited.
He's a sovereign citizen. He was riding around with, made-up crayon license plates, et cetera, et cetera. These guys are just lunatics.
Why didn't they get those guys to forge the Electoral College certificates? They love
this. Was at the Coachella rally.
Right.
Which we'll have something to talk about in a minute. But I just want to point out the local sheriff, who is a right-wing nut job, said this guy with the guns who was arrested is really a right-wing nut job.
Oh, it's different.
He's a lunatic.
Yeah. Interesting, too, that we remember we went into the weekend with just interesting that you mentioned that the local sheriff is a right-wing lunatic. But sheriffs very often are. I don't know exactly what the dynamic is, but we had gone into the weekend saying, oh, well, the word in Coachella area is, what's Trump doing here anyway? This isn't his kind of place. But I guess it is if he's hanging out with the sheriff, but no one else. This guy and the sheriff.
It's really hard to know, and that gets to the whole state of the race. And, why is he campaigning in places like Madison Square Garden and Coachella and Colorado, Aurora, Colorado?
Near assassins.
And the simple answer is he wants to, because they're all ego boosters.
I guess so.
He wanted to be able to say he had a bigger crowd in Coachella than, name your
I have more assassins trying to kill me than people at the rally. But
the weird thing is that Alex Jones had an actual broadcast where he said, we really need to kill Trump because that way we could have justification for killing Biden and everybody else.
It's an interesting entree.
That's a thought.
Yeah. I mean,
this is why the family sued Alex Jones to get him off the air.
Right. What happened he's done and he has no money? Where did that go?
Well, they're still working out stuff in court.
Well, he's impatient.
He's supposed to auction off all the stuff. He says he still wants to stay on the air, but, he still, in fact, does have to auction off stuff.
What am I bid for this microphone right here in front of me?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's interesting. So he's, while he's waiting to sell everything off so that he can pay everybody for being punished for calling for murder on the air, he figured, I'll call for another. What are they going to take it away again? I'll call for another murder. And an interesting strategy. Kill our guy, then we'll feel justified killing your guy. There's an old saying about
don't do that.
Some number of wrongs.
One of the old sayings, don't even go there.
Stop.
Do those
don't say that.
Stop. Don't say it. Don't do it. I'm just saying it's Alex Jones.
Yeah. There's an old saying, you're under arrest. And they just don't say it the way they use. You notice they don't say this anymore. The cops, they need to be able to do their jobs. One really lawful day is all we need.
Yeah. Let's do a little polling primer.
All right.
This morning. And we're actually going to start with something related, tangential, parallel, and that's early vote.
All right.
This is a teaching case, and it comes from Max.
Okay.
Hi, you got to trust the guy named Max. He's from Split Ticket, so he's a data analyst.
Okay.
And says, here's why you should beware any early mail vote comparisons to 2020. The problem with looking at early vote, the Democrats are looking great. Well, what are you comparing it to? 2022, that wasn't a presidential election year. 2020, that was a pandemic.
Yeah.
2016, the world was different.
1848?
Yes.
That was... Okay.
Yeah, Tippecanoe and Tyler, too. So here's why you should beware. This is Maryland, just as a comparison.
Okay.
All right? And in Maryland...
Yes.
Which is right next to Delaware and is friendly Democratic country. In 2020, Joe Biden won Maryland with 67% of the ballots cast.
Okay.
In 2022, Wes Moore, very popular Democratic governor.
Yes. He's there now.
Yeah. Was running, and he won 67% of the ballots cast.
Wow. Okay.
Just like 2020.
Yeah.
However, even though they both got to 67%, Biden and Wes Moore, they got there by completely different methods. In 2020, the mail-in ballots were 53% of the ballots cast. In 2022, they were only 29% of the ballots cast.
Yeah.
So even though the way people voted completely shifted, the outcome was the same. So how do you compare 2022 mail-in ballots to 2020 mail-in ballots? You can't. That's the point.
You could put them, color, size, you could compare them that way.
Right. In
100% of them are made of paper.
The election day percentage was only 14%.
Yes.
In 2022, it was 52%. Right. So half of the voters are going to vote either by mail-in or in person early.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
that's not what happened in 2020. So how do you compare mail-in? You're comparing apples to kumquats.
I guess so. I mean, really, all you can. You can work around it. I mean, I understand that. Well, in the pandemic year, everybody sort of felt forced to vote by mail. Democrats.
Not Republicans,
that's right.
Republicans didn't believe
they went out and got sick.
It was real.
Right. That's true. And then 2022, I don't know. I guess I got the feeling that people were like, "Oh, I'd love to go back out again."
2020 for Republicans.
Yeah. Now in 2022, they say, all right, I can go back out and vote again. And by 2024, they're like, I liked the work from home, actually, and maybe I'll start mailing in my ballots again. But I'm curious to see whether it jumps back up again.
Now here's what you can say.
The nostalgia wears off. Yeah.
All right. In 2020, 53% of the ballots cast were mail-ins.
Yes.
Because of the pandemic.
Right.
And it broke down 83% Democrat, 17% Republican.
Uh-huh.
In 2022, it dropped from 53 to 29% the ballots cast.
53 to 29, yes.
Because everybody went and voted Election Day.
Yeah. Love to get out and wait in line again.
But the mail-in in 2022 was, wait for it, 83% Democrat and 17% Republican.
Okay.
Just like in 2020. So maybe you could look at the mail-ins in 2024 and say, well, if we're running that sort of number, maybe we'll get the same result. Maybe. Just like you could look at the polls and say, maybe Harris is ahead. Maybe. Yeah. We don't know.
Maybe these people won't show up for Trump.
Things change, and you don't know what error is introduced this year. The polls are wrong. I mean, everybody acknowledges that.
Okay.
The polls are going to be wrong because there's always going to be a 2% polling error every year.
Yes.
The question is going to be which direction. Yeah. If it's Harris's direction, that's a landslide for her.
I want that one.
Yes. If it's Trump's direction, he might win. So that's why the polls at this particular point in time don't help you that much. Early vote is comforting if you want it to be, but it really doesn't help you know what's going to happen. Nate Cohn has a piece this morning. What if the polls are wrong? In such a close race, even the slightest movement in the polls takes on outsized significance. For the same reason, even a modest error in the polls could yield a very different result. Either candidate could win decisively. If the polls underestimate Mr. Trump yet again, even by a hair, he wins. But the opposite could be true. Polls underestimated Democrats in 2022. Ms. Harris could win easily if they do that again, even slightly. So what's going on here? He does say that if you look at the averages, and the whole beauty of doing averages with so many polls over so long a period of time, even red wave polling, that is to say, the Insider Advantage and Trafalgar's of the world who lean Republican and flood the zone at the end of the election season don't really change the averages, not to any significant degree. So that's important. Ezra Klein has a similar piece, says ignore the polls, and basically you can read why, but the bottom line there is the polls can't tell you which way they're going to be wrong, nor by how much, and that's what matters.
Yes, but if you ignore the polls, George W. Bush will tell you, you forgot Poland.
Well, not just that. I say, forget the polls and sign the checks, is what I say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sure.
You could leave the Slovaks out altogether if you want. But,
okay.
That's what you need to do. But I say get them all. Big tent.
Okay.
You know, you want everybody voting for you, especially polls in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
They're like 800.
That, too, is a big theme of the last couple of days of people saying, I liked it earlier when we were talking about how J.D. Vance is weird. Why are we now saying we have economic plans and maybe we would work with Republicans on things?
It's funny because people say, when you ask them, I want to learn more about strategy and I want to learn about policy from Harris because I've already rejected Trump and I want Harris to make me feel comfortable that her policy isn't far left the way she was in the 2019 primary when she was Medicare for all. Okay, fine. She has a new proposal and it's really covered well by Jonathan Cohen.
Okay.
And her new policy is actually, as Joe Biden might say, a BFD.
Oh, good.
She wants Medicare to cover senior end-of-life in-home care.
Yeah, okay.
That's a game changer for, I can't tell you how many people.
50 million.
Just like everybody. Everybody has a family where somebody's going to need in-home care at some point, and it's prohibitively expensive. Jonathan Cohen writes, social media reaction to Harris' home care proposal like nothing I've ever seen. So many people saying they're struggling could use the help. Reaction to the political set, a collective shrug. Or his story in the HuffPost. What real people get about Kamala Harris's big new idea that the political set can't grasp, the reaction she's gotten shows just how big a need Harris is trying to address. And for those people who say, yeah, but I want policy, okay, there's your policy. Yeah, but it's not entertaining. I want entertaining policy.
How are you going to threaten the lives of the other guys? Well, that's the Republican folks like that.
How does this
it's not as entertaining to Democrats. Yeah. I wonder, I mean, a lot, political reporting, very much, for the most part, a younger person's game. It's a strenuous schedule, and perhaps they don't really realize how much it's going to cost them pretty soon for care for their parents. But
it's an enormous need. It's really a big deal. Cohen interviews some people to talk about why it's a big deal, and then he gets a sample. From Twitter. This would have saved my family so much pain and so many sleepless nights, said one person. My dad spent the last 3 years of my grandma's life taking care of her. In the process, any money she saved up and he saved up evaporated. This will legitimately change lives, both for the people receiving care and their loved ones, just to give you a sample.
Yes.
Third one, bravo. I spent years caring for my mother without assistance, and her only choice was a nursing home. Yeah. I'm 71 and providing hours a daily care to my 68-year-old sister-in-law who's incapable of caring for herself, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on. And he notes the announcement was met with a shrug, which is nuts because, this affects everybody.
Yeah.
And that's to say, Jonathan Cohen says, nothing a ridiculously full news cycle, which includes not just the campaign, but also 2 natural disasters, 2 major and a major conflict in the Middle East. You don't need 2. One's enough. To name just a few big stories.
It's really just one.
Everybody in politics is trying to do too much. Everybody's missed things. I certainly have. But the relative lack of attention to Harris's proposal is more than a little ironic, given all the grief she's taken for not putting forward enough policy, not outlining a vision, not distinguishing herself from Joe Biden. Here it is.
Yeah. Oh, well. What did Trump say? Let's ask her what she thinks about what Trump said.
Let's ask her what she thinks Trump will say, because he hasn't said anything yet, because he has no idea what this is about, because it's policy.
No, it doesn't matter. Right. It's communist, whatever it is. Yeah, interesting, too. It's an interesting reception for a very good plan that will relieve a lot of people of sleepless nights and, financial ruin in ways that somehow this time is not a moral hazard and doesn't make people say, I paid mine, why are you not paying yours? But students are, shut up, kids, and older people who are taking care of aging parents. Now, that's real America. Okay.
So, I think the bottom line is that we're in decent shape. Nothing about the ground game I hear from the people I know in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania suggests that we're in trouble.
Okay. Well, that's good. It is in everyone's nature to worry. We don't even have to limit it to Democrats, although Republicans like to convince themselves that they don't worry, but they worry
But they are worrying. And so I want to cover some of that too.
Okay.
What I wrote this morning.
Disregard everything that came before.
Is, the headlines are going to read like, warning signs for Republicans. And that's what, Politico has this morning. Internal polling memo has warning signs for Senate Republicans.
All right.
Or, Democrats panicking because Harris isn't walking on water. And so that's a typical Democratic response. And the fact of the matter is, it's a close race and we don't know which way the polling error is and you can't really know. And early voting by mail doesn't really help you know. And so we're just going to have to wait for 2 weeks to open those votes. What happens.
Could sympathetic county clerks break in, open the ballots, count them, and announce the results to prevent, fraud? Would that be okay, or would you be sentenced to prison if you did that?
Interestingly, in Pennsylvania, there's a new law in place. Our friend Adam Bowden tells us that you are actually allowed to open and tally, but not tell anybody, the mail vote prior to 8 p.m. on election night.
How much prior?
You can start, soon. Oh. So days before. So in other words, you'll announce them.
I did not know that they changed that. I thought we were in for another. Oh no, Pennsylvania.
Yes, Pennsylvania might not be as bad this year, is what I'm saying.
All right.
It might not be.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that we're going to, Florida know by 9:00, but it should be a little better than it was. So we should get a better idea in bellwether counties, for example, about what's going on. So that's some good news. Sure. But in any case, this is continuing with the polling thing. This is Dan Pfeiffer writing in the message box. It's time to stop panicking about the polls. Media narratives come and go, but the race has been in the same place for a while, which is to say it's close and we don't know the polling error. So yet another piece here. To quote a famous meme from this exact moment in the 2008 campaign, everybody needs to chill the F out.
Okay. But this isn't 2008, but there's a parallel. Right. Yeah.
I am not telling, Dan Pfeiffer says, anyone to stop bedwetting. And I am certainly not telling people Kamala Harris will definitely win. Trump may still win. We know this. By some measures, Trump is stronger than he was in 2020, but the whiplash between the Democratic elation of a few weeks ago and the full-on panic of the last few days is detached from reality. This has been a remarkably stable race. The vibes changed, but the race hasn't. And as to why the vibes changed, there was all these internal leaks about how Republicans think they're stronger and Democrats worried that, Democrats are always worried. And they run to the press to tell people because it's their version of therapy.
I guess that's true. You'd think there would be more headlines about our childhood.
They're not listening to me. The only way I can get them to listen to me is to go to the press because they read the press. They'll listen to me. They should have hired me. I told them they should have hired me.
Yes. Although, there's some people who create jobs for themselves out of that. I don't really understand it. I can't. But
well, it's a long-standing tradition in Washington. All 7 battleground states are within 2 points. Essentially statistical ties. That'll make Wolf Blitzer happy. He loves saying it's a statistical dead heat. If you squint, you can catch slight movement towards Trump over the last 2 weeks. While there's been also some movement in Harris's direction. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's noise. It's noise. When it's that tight, it's noise. Either way, remember, polls are not predictive. They're imprecise snapshots of time. A Quinnipiac poll came out, which is usually favorable to Harris, and it was a little bit more favorable to Trump, and people started freaking out. That's what happened.
Oh, I see.
I bring up this imprecision not to suggest the polls are wrong or biased or the averages are irrevocably screwed because of a flood of junk GOP polls. None of that's true. It's just that they are imprecise. And that's why Ezra Klein wrote what he wrote. At this point, it's telling us it's a close race. We don't know which direction the error is, so just forget about them.
Oh.
And by the way, they're really expensive to do properly, and so you don't see as many of them.
Oh, okay.
So then you step back and you look at the other stuff. Well, this is interesting. This is from Politico. As I said, internal polling memo has warning signs for Senate Republicans. And they're really fairly interesting in terms of what some of the results are saying. Very, very mixed results. So Aaron Astor had a thread about that, which I thought was very interesting. He said, it's an actual polling memo with internal polls and results for Senate and President across several states with pollster names listed. It's not a rumor of who's underwater or vibe gossip like Mark Halperin does that Republicans and Democrats both tell me they think Harris is losing. Mm-hmm. How would you know? Democrats don't talk to you, and they haven't talked to you for like 5 years.
It's a pretty good guess.
Ever since you were kicked off the circuit for like being a sex predator.
Yeah.
I don't know, Aaron Astor says, why somebody leaked it to Politico. Could be a donor who wanted to bring attention to some races, just for the same reason the Democrats complain to the press. And some Republicans complain to the press because they want the principals to pay attention and wish to abandon. Here's the link to the PDF. Perhaps most importantly, it shows the presidential race really is there for the taking by Harris, as long as her ground game is robust. She's tied in Arizona, according to this GOP internal memo. She's down 4 in Ohio.
Okay.
She's down 5 in Texas. Those are small numbers for Democrats.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania's a 1-point Harris lead. Michigan's up 2. And the only downer is Wisconsin, where she trails by 1. And I don't believe that.
Yeah. Well,
for what it's worth, these numbers are consistent with the Washington primary of a 3+ national environment for Democrats, and they also don't suggest there's any hidden Trump support unaccounted for.
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly, Trump does lead the GOP Senate candidate in each state, and numbers are below 50. In other words, Trump's below 50. He's still running better than the Republicans in those states.
Good.
That's because those Republicans in those states are just doing really badly. Let me give you one
that's
example.
The part I like. All right.
Dave McCormick.
Yes.
Pennsylvania,
right.
The Connecticut guy running in Pennsylvania.
Not
right?
you,
but
him.
So the Connecticut guy in Pennsylvania goes to a Philadelphia Eagles game.
Yeah.
And tweets, "It's great being here with the Steelers."
What? And they weren't there, right? It wasn't an Eagles-Steelers
tweet
game.
up. I took a screenshot just to make sure it didn't disappear.
Ha!
But the tweet is still up.
Yeah.
All right.
That'll be
big.
Big
Bad
and
candidates
popular.
are just not going to do well, is my point here.
Yeah, I guess not. Can't tell the difference between the two. That's odd.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, watching the Steelers in Philadelphia and the
fun tailgate in Philly today, writes Dave McCormick. Excited to watch the Steelers throttle the Raiders.
They, of course, play in Pittsburgh, not Philadelphia. Yeah, so there's 4 pictures here, and
the Steelers did throttle the Raiders. That's
right,
true.
Well, at least he got that right.
They beat them 32-13. And so, this was one of those, I like Sheetz and Wawa equally. I think that's what he meant, but it's Dave McCormick, so it came out exactly the awkward way you'd think it was. This is J.D. Vance going to a donut shop to order.
Yes.
And no, he hasn't stopped being weird just because Republicans now think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I believe what Republicans are thinking is, should Trump win, Trump, as somebody put it, is one hamburger away from having President Vance, so we better get behind him or he will kill us.
Yes. That could
figuratively.
be. Yeah. Sure, of course. Except literally. But when I say literally, I mean figuratively, literally.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So rooting for the Steelers from the Philly parking lot. That's a new one.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to like the American League, so here I am at Fenway Park rooting for the Yankees because, like, we're all one big family, right?
Sure. We're all I just hope everybody out there has a good time.
I'm in New York. Let's root for the Jets and the Bills, even though they're playing each other.
And that can happen. Well, all right. So he's got that wrong. I guess there's the possibility that, okay, well, I'm rooting for everybody, which really doesn't work. It's a state full of people that know you can't really root for both.
You got to pick a team.
Okay. So he didn't do it because he's pandering to everybody.
I'm eating at Pat's and Geno's at the same time here in Philadelphia.
Right.
Which has the better cheesesteak? Yes.
Exactly. So I'm for that.
One's with and one's without whiz.
Yeah. Gruyere whiz. He's from Connecticut. He's maybe putting, one of these weird soft cheeses on his thing. He's very hoity-toity Connecticut.
Right. Well, it's a little runny.
All right. So,
which, reminds me of something else, free association, speaking of Monty Python.
Oh boy.
Well, the way the media covers Trump and Harris.
Do they, though?
Reminds me of an old sketch that Monty Python did where historian Sir Kenneth Clark was in the ring with a boxer.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a match.
I'm trying to think about this. Yeah.
Sir Kenneth Clark was played by Graham Chapman, and he gets in the ring and he goes to the microphone and starts reciting a very boring history lecture while the boxer just pounds him in the face. And guess what? The boxer won. Sir Kenneth Clark is down. And so the way the press approaches this whole election is that everything that Trump does is interesting and entertaining, and policy that Harris may have is boring, and we'll cover it on page 19 if we cover it at all.
Right.
So the East Coast people talk about an interesting Coachella rally.
Yes.
Which was laced with anti-immigrant sentiment.
You could say that. They did
As if somebody had come in from a helicopter and talked about anti-immigrant, rather than the guy who was up at the podium.
Yes, and everybody who introduced him, and yeah.
But that's the East Coast.
Okay.
They're the same
West
washers.
Coast say.
Times of San Diego says heat exhaustion, violent speech, reports of missing shuttles mar Trump rally in Coachella.
Oh, yeah, I did hear
What happened is that people went, and then the buses disappeared, so they were all stranded miles from their car. Plenty of violent speech. And of course, they had that guy who was arrested for being a sovereign citizen, in effect.
Yes. That was
and heat exhaustion, it was over 100, and people were dropping like flies.
They did say it was going to be super hot, and I heard about the missing shuttle buses, which I thought was interesting, and, they do that a lot.
A Saturday evening a campaign, it's just so refreshing to actually hear the media cover it the way it should be covered, and just makes you all the more annoyed about how they do cover it. A Saturday evening campaign rally in Coachella by former President Donald Trump was punctuated by extreme heat, violent ideation, and reports of rallygoers stranded miles from their cars after the event ended. Trump also called for a protester to go back home to mommy to get the hell knocked out of her. In his latest instance, using violent language when confronted by demonstrators.
He does that
the protester was ejected as the crowd jeered her. Trump said, "Back home to mommy." She goes back to mommy. And so, that's how you should cover him. See the rallies, watch the rallies, but at the very least, report the exact language he's using at the rallies rather than saying, well, Trump discussed policy about how he would approach
my
protesters.
Policy to beat them. I don't know.
What was that policy? Why don't you tell us what the policy was?
Oh, no.
The policy was to beat them. Why don't you just say that?
I'm not sure. I mean, for a moment I said, well, is it possible that East Coast, they have their deadlines before the rally, but it's not like it's hard to predict that he was going to say what he says at East Coast rallies on the West Coast. You could have just run a report from an East Coast rally, erased the date line, and said it was. Yeah, he went and he called for violence against immigrants and for his opponents to be jailed. I'm not wrong. I wrote it yesterday, but I'm not wrong.
So this is Margaret Sullivan writing in her Substack American Crisis about those New York Times headlines.
Oh no.
Twitter, which is what I prefer to call Elon Musk's disaster, is still interesting and useful at times, despite its decay. I agree with that. That's why I still use it. For example, unlike Blue Sky, which is wonderful, it doesn't embed in Daily Kos, so it doesn't suit my needs.
I haven't tried that. Okay.
And the other day, there was a dust-up there over 2 New York Times headlines. One was about Kamala Harris, the other about Donald Trump, positioned directly next to each other as they were on the Times site. And remember, this is the boxer versus Sir Kenneth Clark.
Yes.
They were quickly seen as a microcosm of what the hell is wrong with media. This arrangement and editorial gloss may stand for capture the journalism about the entire campaign, said Josh Marshall, founder of Talking Points Memo.
Yes.
One, on a story about how Harris has avoided specifics in order to stay on message as she does press interviews, reads, in interviews, Kamala Harris continues to bob and weave.
Ah, yeah, okay. I have seen this.
The other, on a story about Trump's alarming language about migrants as carriers of supposedly impure bloodlines and genes, reads, in remarks about migrants, Donald Trump invokes his long-held fascination with genes and genetics.
No, he does not.
Commenting on the second headline, the author Stuart Stevens, who writes about how democracies turn into autocracy, suggested the 2 headlines should be studied in journalism class for decades. After I responded, not a bad idea, a prominent voice in the New York Times, Mikey Barbaro, who hosts the Daily podcast, posed a challenge to me. You care to explain what the issue is with these headlines? No. Now, Barbaro, who I know from my days as public editor of the Times, is a smart guy, so I'm pretty sure he knows what the issue is. But sure, I'll explain. The Kamala Harris headline is unnecessarily negative over a story that probably doesn't need to exist because politicians, if they are skilled, do this all the time.
Yes.
They answer questions by trying to stay on message. Ask Donald Trump about policy, his answer is immigrants.
Yes, or, one of his famous
parties. Well, what
parties.
Specifically? Well, the whole immigrant thing. And as she says, they stay away from specifics that don't serve their purpose.
Yeah.
Can you be a political reporter and not know this?
I think it's happening, but you shouldn't be.
This is not news, she writes, but it fits in with the overhyped concern over how Harris supposedly hasn't been accessible enough to the media. Doesn't seem to matter. Just days ago, she submitted to an interview with CBS News' 60 Minutes.
And 50,000 other places.
Right. Meanwhile, we know Trump first agreed to and then backed out of that. So it's a negative headline over a dubious story by itself, not really a huge deal. But another example of big journalism trying to find fault with Harris, more of an eye roll perhaps. But juxtapose it with the Trump headline, which takes a hate-filled trope and treats it like some sort of lofty intellectual interest.
Yeah.
That headline, wrote Stevens, could apply to an article about a Nobel Prize winner in genetics studies.
Yeah. It's not like he actually understands genetics or anything.
Right. In its 11th paragraph, if you read down that far, it says, Trump has a pattern of using dehumanizing language to describe undocumented immigrants. He's repeatedly referred to immigrants who commit crimes as animals. This is true. The Times can defend itself because we said that. Should have been in the frickin' headline, and it should have been in the first 3 paragraphs.
Yes.
Later still, it noted Trump's insistence on undocumented immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country evokes the ideology of eugenics, and it's vile stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
In parting, I'll share with you a post from historian and author Kevin Kruse about Trump. Historians, he's a fascist. Political scientists, he's a fascist. His own aides, he's a fascist. The New York Times, he shows a wistful longing for a bygone era of global politics.
Yeah.
That, in essence, is the issue with these headlines.
Yes. Okay. That sums it up. I was a little fascinated with that. And it makes it sound like he likes to dabble in science because of how, analytical his mind is. And
Trump is evocative of an early era.
Yeah.
1934 Germany.
Yeah, sure. Right. And
just like Pat Buchanan was.
Well, yes. Although at least Pat Buchanan never pretended he was a geneticist. And I'm just picturing Trump talking about his uncle and John Trump and MIT, yada, yada, on and on about this. And then it doesn't have any fascination with genetics. He has a fascination with saying he's terrific and so is his family, and everybody else should be more or less in prison or killed. That's not genetics.
Now, here's another interesting one, and this is from the New York Times, and it's a fascinating look at not the Trump rally voters, the people who go to Coachella,
Okay.
And, keel over from heat exhaustion or bring guns and try to cosplay it being a sovereign citizen. It's talking about a, quote, economics policy speech, end quote, he gave in Detroit.
Oh, yeah, another one of these.
To the Detroit Economic Club last Thursday.
He keeps getting invited to talk to economics clubs, and they don't get disappointed when he doesn't understand economics. I find that odd.
Well, but here's the headline and the story and why it's so fascinating, exactly for the reason you said. Yes. The Trump voters who don't believe Trump.
Ah, yeah, I saw this.
When the former president endorses violence and proposes using the government to attack his enemies, many of his supporters assume it's just an act. He doesn't really mean that.
Sure.
Well, what does he mean?
I don't know. What?
Well, he means he'll cut our taxes. That's all I need to know.
No, he said he would cut their heads off.
Taxes.
Taxes.
He would tax their
Texas?
In Texas.
Sax and violins on TV.
He's talking about Saxons. Anglo-Saxon.
My favorite kind.
Yeah.
I did see this one. I was very... Well, I don't know what I can say.
So
puzzled,
you read the quotes. They found it easy to tune out the other versions of it. This is the version they wanted. The one which they and their 401ks want to believe, says the story. I think the media blows stuff out of proportion for sensationalism. Asked if he believed Trump would purge the federal government and fill its ranks with election deniers. No, I don't. Why was Mr. Trump saying he wanted to? Just for publicity. Just riling up.
Publicity. I love murder. Write that down. Any good,
What about going after President Biden and members of his family? I don't think it's on his list of things to do. No, I don't believe it. Right? So they're lying to themselves. They're lying to you.
Yeah.
And, they've decided that they're Republicans and they're just voting for a Republican. And so they have to remake, in their eyes, the Republican to be what they think Mitt Romney should have been.
Wasn't he?
And that's the answer to your question as to anybody's question. How can these people vote for Trump? Because they lie to themselves about who he is.
Yeah, I mean, there's
it's just right here. It's all
there's
there.
No logic to it. There's no
arguing with the media.
Yeah, right.
Because you could point out, he said this, he said this, here's the documentation. I don't believe it.
Right.
Why don't you believe it?
So what do you do with that? It raises a number of other problems like, well, what do you believe he believes? I don't know. I can't say. I think low taxes, I guess, but there's a million reasons why this thing really was bothersome, including that this is, again, the economic club. And I'm not a member of any economic club, but I do wonder.
Yeah, because I'm
what is this thing anymore? I mean, yeah, right.
I wouldn't be a member of any club
collection
that would have me.
Economists? Is it just people who are in business and so they think economics, that's sort of like business? It isn't.
The dour science, yes.
And so I'll go and I don't know. I'm a wealthy business owner, so I go to the economic
to have lunch
club.
With other wealthy business
I guess that's
owners.
really it.
Disguise the entertainment,
Yeah.
It's like the White House Correspondents' Dinner for me.
Like if it was really economists, like when he went and did the New York Economic Club, and he says, I'm going to quadruple tariffs. Like say that in front of a group of economists, and I guess I don't know what
they'll gasp.
Yeah, I was going to say they'll throw things that they won't. But they'll talk about it, and I guess the Detroit Economic Club is just, I don't know. Did you say you were going to cut our taxes or not? That's the only economics they're interested in. Because I remember being instructed, generally speaking, political science, economics, that, well, the business conservative community wants and values nothing more highly than predictability. Predictability is everything for the business set. And if you are voting for somebody based on, well, he says this, but he doesn't mean that. And what does he mean? I don't know what he means. I have no idea what's going on or what he's really going to deliver, although I believe he's going to cut my taxes because I think he's going to cut his taxes. So maybe he'll cut mine as well. I'm wealthy. That's it. And so all the predictability is gone. And I guess they really don't value that. They just value cutting their taxes more highly than anything else. And I did see some people saying the real thing to take away from this is not sure whether they really believe he isn't going to do the things he says, but what they are sure they believe is that it isn't going to happen to them, so they don't really give a crap about whether or not it's true that he's going to do these things to other people. And that's the bottom line. And that seems like a pretty good interpretation of things. And, I also liked Sean McCreish's line there, too. I was just looking to see who that was, the reporter, that he got away with that 401k line.
Yep.
That was pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah. So a very interesting article. I think I might want to read that one and talk about that in depth. But it's odd that all the predictability is out the window because they're saying, I don't believe any of the things he says. And, even if that was true, and I guess you could say, well, they're predicting that he's not going to do all the things he said. That's their prediction. And they believe they're right about that prediction. But then it should be resulting in a raft of stories, if things were fair, which they're not, of, well, what is Trump's plan? What do you think he's planning? How come he's so light on policy details? Isn't that terrible? He's bobbing and weaving. But they don't write those stories.
By the way, and here's another way you look at it. I sent you a thread reader, so you don't have to go to Twitter.
Okay.
From a true believer who was at the Coachella rally.
Oh.
And talking about the fact that it's awful that people are stranded here without buses. We're talking elderly. We're talking no food, no water. It's hours.
Could they do this the day before Election Day, possibly, and strand people there? I would like to see them do that.
But the way he approaches it, from a Trump point of view, is it must have been the mayor of Coachella who set us up for this. They probably wanted a riot, and, it's got nothing to do with Trump being incompetent or the campaign being incompetent. It's all them doing this to us.
They wanted a riot of elderly, dehydrated people.
In effect.
Okay. So, all right. So, Trump would never strand people in the parking lot the way he's stranded people in the parking lot 6 or 7 times before.
Exactly.
It would be the mayor of Coachella.
So this is the working class version of the Detroit Economic Club.
I guess so. Yeah. For
those of you who wonder, how do they still vote for him? Because they've decided to, and so everything else gets filtered through that. Well, don't give me reality. Mm-hmm. Let me explain to you how I would prefer to see it.
Yeah. I guess there's always another level, and if you somehow prove to them that it wasn't the mayor of Coachella's fault, they'll say, well, I'm not going to vote for the vampire pedophiles who keep children in underground prisons. Well, they don't do that either. Well, I don't know. They do. And even if they don't, I wish they did, I think. I don't know. Yeah, certainly no dealing with that. How did he get home to write this stupid thing?
Yeah, well, I don't know. He's probably doing it on his phone.
Yeah, he wasn't there. He's a liar. How about that?
I don't know.
Okay, well, all right. Good, I'm glad. I hope some of these people are...
This is the part of the campaign where Harris having more resources than Trump matters, because in those last couple of weeks, this is where you spend it on specific ads, burying them like 10 to 1. This is where you spend the extra money that you also have that they don't on Get Out the Vote. This is where you send, Obama to Philadelphia and Bill Clinton to rural vote in Georgia.
Yeah.
You have these surrogates. You use them.
Tell the bus drivers to knock off
going on. So Bill Clinton was in Albany, Georgia, during the South Georgia swing, campaigning for Harris again.
Speaking Southern.
Speaking Southern, and what you want is you want people to come out and vote for Harris, and you're going to lose these areas, but you want the margin to be smaller than it otherwise would if you ignored them. That's how Ossoff and Warnock won Georgia, and that's what you do.
Okay. Good. He did it. The buses were working. Nobody was
I didn't see any complaints about that. I didn't see any complaints about the mayor of Coachella in Georgia there.
Right. What about the mayor of whatever town it was in Georgia? Albany. Everything was fine? He didn't...
Albany, New York.
Okay.
What are you doing in Albany, New York? You're supposed to be in Georgia.
What? I can't believe it. Well... I guess it could happen. Mix up. All right. So, no disasters at the shuttle bus stops on the Democratic side. So, I don't know. If you're a shuttle voter, you know what to do. Right. But if you just don't believe it's going to happen to you.
And this was from 2 days ago, just to remind you. We watched 20 Trump rallies, says Politico. Thank God you did. His racist anti-immigrant messaging is getting darker. So some of the political press is starting to pick up on that. Again, I'd rather be the Harris campaign than the Trump campaign in terms of chances of winning, but it's still close. And that's the message. So that's my summary for Monday. All right.
His makeup is getting darker, too.
I'm not on the polar coaster. At this point, I don't think the polls are going to tell us what we need to know. What I'm hearing from the ground game in Pennsylvania, Michigan, et cetera, Wisconsin, is not doom and gloom. And so I don't buy into the Quinnipiac polls. I think they're wrong. And I don't buy into the Harris is losing. I don't think that's correct. I think that she's not extending her lead in the polls. I think you could fairly say that. I don't know what that means.
I don't know if there was a possibility of doing it either. But okay. Yeah. Well, oh no. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. That's all there is to say.
Well, not too long. It's
you can
Monday.
Vote. Yeah.
That means 1 week from today, next Monday.
Yes.
For the very first time in recorded history.
Oh, what are we doing? What day is it?
Early vote in Connecticut starts.
Oh.
We've never done early voting before.
Oh.
First time
I did not
ever.
Know that. Okay.
I mean, we did an early vote during the pandemic because you were allowed to come in and vote just
boxes.
because of the pandemic. Well, yeah, but it was at the town registrar's office. There was only one place. But you could do that. There was a drop box right outside the window of the registrar.
Yeah.
In the town building. So that was nice.
Right through the window, as I recall.
And I did that 2020, All
right.
But this is 2024. I think you have to actually walk into the registrar's office.
Whoa.
So I'm going to maybe vote Monday or Tuesday, and we'll see what happens.
All right. We'll walk around that flagpole.
If it doesn't work, if they're not set up,
way.
If, they're doing it for the first time. If it's a mess, then I'll just do it my normal polling day.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right, early voting. I'm going to make a trip to the office, at least one. I don't know if I'm going to bring everybody to vote, but fall college break coming up, and
and not only that, every vote that you do early frees up resources from your Democratic state group to work on the. I don't know if I'm going to vote or not this year, people.
Yeah, if you have been at all disturbed,
the only persuasion is I need to persuade you to vote.
Yes, and that's all they're trying to do. And if you've grown irritated, say by your phone ringing off the hook or people knocking on your doors and stuffing.
You can tell them I already voted and they will go away.
Yes, or you can just go vote and they will find out and they will your card comes out of the stack and people stop knocking on your doors.
It's so wonderful.
They know what's going on. It's a great way to free up your
They're still going to text me from Texas, but
Yes, maybe.
I mean, I literally get 60 texts a day. It's so annoying.
It is, but if you cast that ballot, they do drop in number, and that's the thing. They have the technology
they want money,
to figure it out.
They're not dropping in number.
Oh, those guys, I guess, will not stop. There's nothing you can do about that.
Right. I only get a couple of, do you have a plan? And yes, I do.
Yeah.
In fact,
we just heard it.
Somebody called me.
Oh.
And I took the call. And I said, I have a plan. Fault. You can stop calling me.
Yeah, I have not picked up the phone, generally speaking. But okay, yeah, I have a plan for at least the beginning of the vote casting in the family. And I guess maybe while I'm there, I'll cast my ballot too. And we may have to wait for the rest of the family because they're out of town. But when they come back into town, we'll go cast our votes.
Should we win?
We should.
Then it'll all be worth it.
Yeah. It'll certainly be worth it to have less time with the phone ringing and the door rattling.
That would be nice.
Okay.
Although I like meeting my local candidates. I mean, this is a small town, and you basically know everybody, so it's pretty cool.
That's nice.
Mm. Like the candidate you've never met.
Shutting them out. Yes.
Knocks on your door.
Yeah.
Introduces themselves, tells you who they are. Mm-hmm. And then on the way out, they say, by the way, say hi to, because they know.
Right.
And then they mention somebody you do know, even though you don't know them. Oh. And it's really cool.
It's a nice thing to have those connections. Okay. Well, if you want people knocking on your door, then by all means, I don't know.
So I still
anyway,
am seeing 10-to-1 Harris signs, but the one guy with the chickens that he's raising, as I see when I walk the dog on Sundays, still has his Trump 2024 flag out along with all the local Republicans in town.
And
the only Trump sign I've seen in the neighborhood, but I saw it in 2022. He had a Trump 2020 sign.
Yeah, we got a few around. It's disturbing, especially when
there's a couple who had them in 2020 that I do not see in 2024.
Okay. Well, that's good.
And I see many, many more Harris signs than I did Biden signs in 2020. So, it's all good. So we'll see.
I guess so. There's still the anti-sign people, I guess, running the local places around here. I'm just not seeing signs. They're anti-sign here for some reason. So there are a couple of Trump signs in the neighborhood. Really very disturbing, too. I mean, it's just we all live close to one another, and it's weird to see, hey, that guy just threatened to murder, some significant portion of the population. Putting out a
cool.
sign.
I'm cool with them. I'm getting a bigger sign.
And I don't feel like you're militia type. So I'm curious what drives you. And I guess maybe they're very thrilled now. They've just seen an article about themselves at the Detroit Economic Club not believing anything.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of that. Okay. Not okay.
Well, that's actually good news in terms of how I think about you, that you don't believe it. Because if you said, I believe it and I'm still voting for him, that would be worse.
Yes, right.
So that's it for me for today.
Okay.
Music's coming up soon.
But not quite yet. Right. Okay. So remember, everybody, go to the Philly game and root for Pittsburgh. We learned that.
And tell people that. Tell people, I really hope that, I really prefer Sheets.
I guess
Philly's Wawa territory.
Big regional thing. Now they're building stores right next to each other, like Aldi and Lidl for some reason, and fighting it out. But it used to be
Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Which is it, buddy?
Yeah, I don't know if that didn't feel as much like a rivalry, but I guess it is. Now that I think about it, but you can't do both, and they call you out for it, and I guess they just don't really care about McCormick. They may not know he's really running for Senate there in Pennsylvania. So, all right. Well,
democracy or fascism? Never mind that. We're talking
I like them both.
versus Eagles here.
Sure, right. I think you would all agree that was ridiculous to get out there and say, well, dictatorship or popular democracy. I like them both. They both have their merits. Like, you would be looked at askance.
Well, that's Dave McCormick.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's where
he is. That's also the Detroit Economic Club.
Right.
All righty. Take care. I'll talk to you Wednesday.
Okay. Or Thursday. Or both. Or, actually, that's true. Okay. Very exciting.
I prefer days that end in Y myself.
Also, but if it doesn't, they're okay too. And I hope they do well today. All right. We'll see you on Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see what we want to round up today. There are many things. I am kind of interested in that Trump voters who don't believe Trump theme, and thought I might actually read through the article just to see kind of what the hell are you talking about? Where are you coming from with this? And again, to express my admiration for sneaking this line by. Sean McCreesh is the writer here, and it's Campaign Notebook, which I guess perhaps they give a little bit more leeway than your just the facts, except none of the facts reporting versus opinion reporting. But I just thought that was an interesting line they got by. Right up at the top, I think, if I recall, I did see that one in a quick skim of the first paragraphs, and Greg mentioned it. Where is this one? I don't know. I don't see the numbers jumping out of the paragraph here, but basically, saying that Trump was telling them what they wanted to hear and what their 401ks wanted to hear too. But this is the reporting here. One of the and did I read you the headline? Trump voters who don't believe Trump. Subheader: when the former president endorses violence and proposes using the government to attack his enemies, many of his supporters assume it's just an act. And thankfully this isn't the only reporting going on. They do also report, hey, he is in fact spending his time endorsing violence and proposing using the government to attack his enemies. Here's a report from California. But in Detroit, no. One of the more peculiar aspects of Donald J. Trump's political appeal is this: a lot of people are happy to vote for him because they simply do not believe he will do many of the things he says he will. Which is interesting, too, because, sometimes they exist side by side, and sometimes it's the same person, right? He tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter. Well, is he going to do these things that he says he's going to do? No, and thank God. That's why I'm voting for him. How is he a straight shooter? Look, it's the good rich blimp, I guess, is what they say next. The former president has talked about weaponizing the Justice Department and jailing political opponents. There's a link here for that. He has said he would purge the government of non-loyalists and that he would have trouble hiring anyone who admits that the 2020 election wasn't stolen. He proposed, quote, one really violent day in which police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity. He has promised mass deportations. I mean, there were placards at the convention, mass deportation now, which is probably the most alarming manifestation of that policy, and predicted it would be a bloody story. And while many of his supporters thrill at such talk, there are plenty of others who figure it's all just part of some big act. There is, of course, evidence to the contrary. Good paragraph here, right? During Mr. Trump's term in office, some of his autocratic rhetoric did become reality. He really did set in motion a Muslim ban. He really did order up investigations of his foes. Links as well. He really did foment a mob when the election didn't go his way. But in other instances, he was stymied, and a lot of his strongman jaw remained just that. That's the way some of his voters think another term might go. It's how they rationalize his rhetoric by affording him a reverse benefit of the doubt. They doubt, he benefits. That is pretty interesting. That is pretty amazing. And also, of course, by the way, talk to his diehard supporters about all the things that he promised that he didn't do in the first term. They say that was all because the deep state got in the way and we're going to kill all of them. So this time it won't happen that way. And that sinks in not at all with the Detroit economic crowd, I guess. Last Thursday, inside a small music venue in downtown Detroit during the middle of the day, you could see this phenomenon playing out quite clearly. Mr. Trump was there to address the Detroit Economic Club. Presidents Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama had all in their respective days come to Michigan to talk to this club, too. There were a few hundred people there. They were not the sorts of people one encounters at a Trump rally. They weren't construction workers or truck drivers or forklift operators. They carried business cards and had very active LinkedIn pages. They did not wear red hats or T-shirts with images of Trump's bloodied face. They wore window-pane suit jackets and loafers rather conspicuous cufflinks. That's interesting. They did not want to hear about one really violent day or about the deep state or the Marxists or the fascists or any of the other radical or anti-democratic visions that Mr. Trump describes in baroque detail at his rallies. They just wanted him to tell them that he would be good for business, even though he's actually quite bad at business, which is odd. So he did for nearly 2 hours. There were rough edges in his remarks and some talk of a stolen election, but mostly he made them feel comfortable in their choice to vote for him. They chuckled at his self-deprecating wisecracks about his age, his body, his hair, and his wealth. He talked about American muscle cars and regaled them with tales of how he went toe-to-toe with various world leaders and about his new buddy, Elon Musk. I guess they think that's good for business, too. By the way, yeah, this reminded me here, the talk about American muscle cars. I did hear him or hear about him saying, I don't know, about a week or two ago. I just thought it was an interesting little slip up as he always is, or maybe, he didn't even think it was a slip up, but saying in a rally speech somewhere, same thing about the cars. And we're going to go back to making cars like America used to make 40 or 50 years ago when it was great, the whole shtick. And he has in mind, American muscle cars. And it occurred to somebody who was watching the speech. Again, Trump's brain is stuck in his heyday. So 80s, maybe on into the 90s. He's just sort of still has his brain there and says things like, we'll make cars like we did 40 or 50 years ago, which is in the 80s and 90s, 40 or 50 years ago, was the heyday of the American muscle car. But right now, to say making cars the way we did 40 or 50 years ago, you're talking about like the Plymouth Reliant K car or something, and not exactly the glory days of American anything, let alone American muscle in terms of car building. But there he is 40 or 50 years ago. He has no real clue like where he is in space time. And that's, you know, it's not an issue once, but repeatedly every day speaking like that, it becomes an issue. Anyway, back to this piece here, telling everybody about his new buddy, Elon Musk. They cooed when he told him his daughter Tiffany was newly pregnant, and clapped when he said, however improbably, that he would work with Democrats to get stuff done. This was the version of Mr. Trump in which they and their 401ks wanted to believe. I thought that was a nice move to sneak that in there. They found it easy to tune out the other versions of him. And some quotes here. I think the media blows stuff out of proportion for sensationalism, said Mario Facchini, a 40-year-old Detroit man who owns a book publishing company. Okay, what books? I don't know. His black hair was gelled back, and he had on a boxy black pinstriped suit with a gold pocket square peeking out. There were tiny model globes hanging from his cufflinks. What are those? He held up his wrists and gave one a spin. Like seems like a Tim Burton character more than anything else. I feel like I'm talking to Gomez Adams. What's happening here? Asked if he believed Mr. Trump would purge the federal government and fill its ranks with election deniers, Mr. Facchini sipped his iced tea and thought for a moment. I don't, he said. So why was Mr. Trump saying he wanted to do that? It could just be for publicity, Mr. Facchini said with a shrug, just riling up the news. Okay. Bad, nonetheless. Mary Burney, a 49-year-old woman from Grosse Pointe, Michigan, who works in sales for a radio station, described herself as an independent-turned Trump voter. She did not believe the former president would really persecute his political opponents, even though he has mused about appointing a special prosecutor to go after President Biden and members of his family. I don't think that's on his list of things to do, she said. No. Tom Pierce, a 67-year-old from Northville, Michigan, did not truly believe that Mr. Trump would round up enough immigrants to carry out the largest mass deportation operation in history, even though that is pretty much the central promise of his campaign. He may say things, and then it gets people all upset, said Mr. Pierce, but then he turns around and he says, no, I'm not doing that. It's a negotiation, but people don't understand that. The negotiation being, I'll murder you all. I'll murder some. Well, I was just negotiating. That's not really a good negotiating tactic. But we continue on. Did Mr. Pierce, a former chief financial officer, believe Mr. Trump would actually levy a 200% tariff against certain companies? No, he said. That's the other thing. You've got to sometimes scare these other countries. Indeed, in an interview on Fox News on Sunday, Mr. Trump said, I'm using that just as a figure. I'll say 100, 200, I'll say 500. I don't care. I guess the percentage of tariff he's going to impose on things. And you know, by the way, is that not even fodder for headlines like, we need policy specifics? Why won't Harris give us policy specifics? And then his policy is, I'm going to have tariffs. What kind of percentage of tariffs? We're all very concerned about business. We want predictability. We want to know what's on the table here. 100, 200, 500. I'll say whatever I want. I don't care. Really? And I guess they just don't know how to translate that into headlines. This man doesn't know anything about how anything works. He's just throwing out numbers. He even will tell you occasionally, I'm just making up numbers. I don't care. That's bad. I have not seen that in the headline. Mr. Pierce added, he's not perfect, and I don't necessarily care for his personality, but I do like how we had peace and prosperity. We did not, and then we had a major pandemic, and he didn't really care how many people died, and they were stacking the bodies up in refrigerator trucks, and he almost died himself, and then he told everybody, just go home and drink your fish tank stuff and eat your ivermectin. Everything's going to be fine, and whatever. Prosperity. I mean, we were on the brink of total economic collapse, Everybody lost their jobs all at once. The economy was collapsing. The supply chain was collapsing. Price gouging through the roof. No toilet paper on the shelves. Couldn't get more than one package of meat per family. We were actually facing like Soviet-looking grocery store shelves. Peace and prosperity. That dynamic is one that Mr. Trump has had with voters ever since he stormed onto the political scene. Oh, I thought stormed the Capitol. But no, stormed onto the political scene 9 years ago. And it endures, even if his language has grown darker. Links there, too, to the latest reporting, I'm sure. In the latest New York Times Siena College poll, 41% of likely voters agreed with the assessment that, quote, people who are offended by Donald Trump take his words too seriously. The normal rules just don't apply to Donald Trump. And you've seen it time and again, said Neil Newhouse, a Republican pollster. Newhouse said that he has found in his polling and focus groups that people think he says things for effect, that he's blustering, because that's part of what he does, his shtick. They don't believe that it's actually going to happen. And of course, the great danger is he says those things for effect, and one of the effects is that lunatics say, the president said I should do this. The president said it was okay. The president invited me here to January 6th. The president told me I should rough up his enemies. The president told me that I would be pardoned if I killed his enemies. Oh, but he doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean he is going to do it. He's not going to do anything. But does he mean for other people to do it? We'll see what happens. But Mr. Trump and those around him have said a second term would be different. So, he's telling you right out. It's different this time. Last time I said it and it didn't happen. Now I'm going to make it happen. Oh. So this time it's going to happen. It's going to be different. Since he finally has a firm grip on his party and because many of the roadblocks that slowed him down before have been pulverized. This is a key part of Vice President Kamala Harris's pitch to voters. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. She said during their debate, we know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. Still, even some of Mr. Trump's more hardcore supporters, the people who go to rallies, wonder how far he can or will go. Hal Garrigues, I'm guessing at that pronunciation, a retired pilot who attended a Trump rally in Bozeman, Montana this year, said in a phone interview that he didn't believe Mr. Trump would, quote, go after Mr. Biden or his family. Quote, because before he said that same crap about Hillary, and then he didn't do anything. Okay. Mr. Garrigues did not think that Mr. Trump would take the United States out of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It'll never happen, is the quote. Nor did he worry about Mr. Trump's fantasy of one violent day of policing. Nah, that's just a soundbite, he said. He's not going to do that. I think people have very thick shock absorbers. That's interesting. When it comes to Donald Trump, said Kellyanne Conway. Oh, okay. I was like, well, he's a pilot. He might know something about shock absorbers. I mean, that's on cars, of course, and not on planes. But I don't know. They tend to be interested in the engines or know a little bit about how they work, and so that translates to the rest of the car body sometimes. But Kellyanne Conway, I don't know if she knows anything about what shock absorbers do or how they work, and I don't know whether the thickness of them make any difference. But okay, that's Kellyanne Conway, super liar, alternative facts, etc. Senior advisor, senior counselor to the former president. People have a very good sense of sussing out rhetoric from reality. And also, I'm not going to be arrested in this, so it's okay. And yet, as president, much of Mr. Trump's rhetoric did become reality. What he said on January 6th, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, ultimately led to his impeachment for inciting insurrection. And, of course, criminal charges as well. Still waiting on that. But a new book by Bob Woodward. Am I reading? Oh, it's the Times. So I'm like, well, of course the Post is going to throw that in there, but the Times will too. In this new book, over the weekend, we heard that General Mark Milley is quoted as saying the former president is, quote, fascist to the core. Mr. Milley, is just one of a long line of top officials and military leaders who worked for Mr. Trump and then told tales afterward about having to constantly work to prevent him from acting out his most anti-democratic impulses. In Detroit, Trump told a version of that reality that was not entirely different. He lamented how his first term in Washington had gone, admitted that he didn't know much about the way the town worked, and that he had to rely on people he could not trust to carry out his wishes. I now know the game a little better, he said, but he also seemed to be aware that there are many people who wonder about some of his words that come out of his mouth. Maybe some of those people were there in that very room. Maybe that's why he went on a tangent about all the ways he thinks Democrats are screwing things up, and then said, you see, that's the real threat to democracy, stupid people. And the businessmen began to clap. Well, the business people, they all did at that point. And I don't know, everybody in that scene is pretty stupid. So they were clapping for themselves, I guess. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's worrisome, but we always knew that there was no logic involved in the way these guys made their decisions. Meanwhile, over in Rolling Stone, the latest reporting paints a slightly different picture. Peter Wade writing this piece entitled Trump. Whoops, I got to get the pop-ups out of the way here. I can't read you the headline because it's important that you be able to buy something. Oh, it's still saying that Trump wants the military to target Americans who oppose him. You know, kind of disconcerting to hear stories like that. Well, let's take a look and see how much of this we can read. The former president says he thinks U.S. troops should be deployed if necessary, and it is not, against radical left lunatics. When? On Election Day. That's interesting. Again, another bit of a, addled brain, right? Well, we should do this on Election Day because, of course, I'm going to win and I should just be made president right away, forgetting that there's this transition time. But the military should be deployed. I should demand that they deploy the military because I'm the commander-in-chief if I win the election. So on Election Day, no, you're not the president yet. But to hell with the Constitution, the rules, the laws, doesn't really mean anything to him. And he knows that his supporters will be very excited about it. And his supporters aren't going to wait for a transition time either. But he's become this growing fascination with military stuff for him right now. I don't know if I pocketed this, but we'll see once I get through this article. Back into pocket. He has been demanding, really, I think, that for the remainder of the campaign that he be allowed to fly around on military aircraft because of all these supposed assassination attempts being made against him. This latest one, questionable again. I mean, it's very much like the last one at the golf course. A person was nearby with a gun, but there's always somebody nearby with a gun, for one thing. And if the Secret Service disarms the person several hundred yards to perhaps up to a half a mile away from where you're going to be later, that's hard to describe as an assassination attempt. But if you have evidence that there was intent, then I guess you bring it. But so far there hasn't been any. But now he wants military aircraft to fly around on, quadrupling his Secret Service protection and maybe some military assets protecting him as well. I guess the only argument for it is that there are apparently, threats, whether you would call them credible threats or just threats you have reason to worry about, that we read about a week or two ago that, the Iranians seem to be interested in actually carrying out some kind of attempt on his life, and maybe you would want military assets in place for something like that. But it's just not the way things work. They're not going to hand you military assets for your personal use if you're not the president at the moment. But I can say I want them, certainly. Who knows? Not certain where that request ends up going, but there it is. By the way, I remind you that I guess Ceausescu wanted to be flown around. He was more entitled. He was nominally the leader of the country, but when he wanted to be ferried around in his escape from the angry mobs that were looking for him, he took refuge in military aircraft, and that was the problem because the military actually turned on him and it spelled his end. Anyway, back to this Rolling Stone piece. Trump wants the military to target Americans who oppose him, and he wants it, I guess, to start on Election Day. Trump has proposed a fascist plan, it says right up at the top, to deploy military forces against U.S. citizens who oppose him on Election Day. Not for people who opposed him on Election Day and then on January 20th send the military after them, although I'm sure he'll be content to do that as well. But start right away. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, the former president told Fox News' Maria Bartiromo when she asked if he expects chaos on Election Day from immigrants. Really? And naturally, that's what she'd ask. Well, if there is chaos, and chaos is a bad thing, although we love it, I don't know. But chaos from people who oppose Trump is a bad thing. And I bet it's going to be immigrants. Why? I don't know. We have some very bad people, some sick people, radical left lunatics. I have to change my voice for him because he's now gone back. He's still using in the interviews, he's gone back to the raspy, gasping, death rattle voice that he's got going on. We have some very bad people. It's very gravelly. Gasps, in between the sentences. Some sick people, radical left lunatics, and it should be handled easily by, if necessary, the National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military. Interesting sidetrack too. I'm gonna do the weave, the Trump weave here. He mentions the National Guard will handle it. I know I did put this. I think I did put this article away. I'll have to go and take a look for it, but. Down in North Carolina, where they're still recovering from Helene and still working, FEMA still on the ground, and emergency workers of all sorts from a lot of federal agencies on the ground trying to assist and lift people back up and put them back on their feet. But Trump is circulating rumors that if you accept help from FEMA, they'll seize your home, or that even if you do go and get help from them, they're only going to give you $750. We've been through that rumor before, too. And worse. I haven't seen the news reporting about this, but apparently, and just picking up news from discussions with my dad, that apparently there's some sorts of people, like, I wonder if you could hang a label on them or something handy that would, the sorts of people who would hang up posters around town like that you shouldn't be accepting help from FEMA because FEMA is run by Homeland Security, and the local mayor, of course, here is going to be no help because everybody who runs everything at every level, FEMA, everybody who runs everything at Homeland Security, everybody who runs everything here in Asheville, are all Jews. And here's a poster with all their faces. Jews, Jews, Jews. They're the ones that it's getting pretty incredible out there. And there's a whole article that I have in pocket about people who are not only refusing then to accept FEMA help, but in fact the rumor is, and apparently the reporting is, that FEMA personnel have withdrawn or at least centralized their operations, whereas they are accustomed to going, if they can, if it's accessible, going house to house, asking people, do you need help? Do you need anything? Or is there something we could be doing for you? Or do you know that help is available and that you can come down to the office and apply? Or here's the paperwork, fill it out and I'll take it in for you, because travel's not that easy. They used to do that, but now they're having to hole up in the offices because of the word is that militias, armed militia types, are out running around, I guess, and this is what you do with your weekends, drive around in pickup trucks with a bunch of guns. What are you guys doing? We're hunting FEMA, they're telling people. And apparently the people that they were telling was National Guard units that encounter them. And like I was saying on social media, gosh, when I was a kid, I just sort of thought that if you just sacked the Capitol with a mob to try to attack Congress to stop them from doing what they were scheduled to do that day, no matter what it was, you would be shot on your way into the building, and no, the National Guard would come out and the Army would come out and stop you because what you're doing is insurrection. But apparently that is not the case. And it is also apparently not the case that if you are hunting FEMA, driving around as an armed militia, and you instead encounter a National Guard unit, I thought they would blow you the F up. They would turn a cannon on you and boom, everything would explode. You're armed insurrectionists. Well, we're from the military. Kaplow. But of course, the reality of it is, well, the National Guard doesn't show up with their cannons and M16s when they're doing disaster relief. They're there to help things out and help rescue people from swift water or bring in supplies and truck them with their 4x4s through the disastrous areas and get to inaccessible places using their military training. And they're not empowered to round people up and throw them in prison even if they're out there threatening the lives of FEMA operators. But we digress. Meanwhile, if you think it was childish of me to think that the National Guard would do something about these kinds of lunatics, well, maybe, because after all, Donald Trump also thinks that they'll be doing something about those lunatics. But I guess if he deploys them on Election Day with the specific aim of nationalizing their service and arming them and telling go shoot protesters, well, once he's commander-in-chief, I guess that's entirely possible that they might actually follow those orders. So as dumb as it is to believe that the National Guard would do these things, there's a guy running for president saying they will do these things. But of course, they don't believe that at the Detroit Economic Club. All right, we got one segment to try to run through a couple of these things that I've woven together for you. The weave. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've checked in Pocket. Those articles are all there, whether we get to them all or not. I reference them all. I'll give you links to them so we can read them on our own if we don't get to mentioning them today or fitting them into our 2-hour segments anyway. All right, so where were we? We're in the middle of the Rolling Stone piece. Might as well get through a bit of that and at least give you a flavor of what's going on. If we have to jump out and do the roundup, then we'll do that. We had left off with Trump telling Maria Bartiromo, right, that, well, it should be handled by, if necessary, the National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, which, National Guard is not the same thing, of course, as the rest of the military. It is state controlled, and it does operate here domestically, and the Army is not supposed to. But that's what he plans to do. If there's chaos on Election Day, or any day, really, that he feels like it, he's going to mobilize the National Guard against the chaos because of all the very bad people, sick people, radical left lunatics. Throughout his campaign, Trump has laid out a dystopian vision for America. America's a hellhole, but that's always been a Republican platform, where the military uses violence to detain and deport immigrants, suppress protests, and target criminals. He has used fascistic, violent language and recently repeated his vow to be a dictator for one day if elected. At a rally last year in Iowa, Trump promised to use federal forces to get crime out of our cities. He went on to say that Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco were crime dens run by Democrats. As Rolling Stone reported, During his time in the White House, Trump became enamored with the idea of using mass executions against gang members and drug kingpins, and maybe everybody. The former president has also said he would send potentially hundreds of thousands of troops to close the southern border and construct immigrant detention camps. He has threatened to engage the military in mass deportations, which could trigger large public demonstrations. I expect massive civil disobedience and then violence. Oh, that's what he was saying. I expect that actually of my supporters. Let's go out and do those things. But this isn't a Trump quote. This is someone entirely different saying, I expect massive civil disobedience and then violence if Trump decides to suppress it using the military. Michael Klarman, a Harvard law professor and an expert in executive power, told Rolling Stone last month. In private emails from a Trump-aligned group obtained by the New York Times, supporters discussed the idea of using troops to stop riots by protesters. I would certainly use the National Guard if the police were unable to stop protests. This was Trump voice. Trump told Time magazine in April. During his presidency, and I don't really know why they think police would be unable to stop protests. They are basically dressing up as RoboCops and coming out and, blowing people's heads off if necessary. But hey, we might need to use more. During his presidency, Trump proposed troops shoot protesters and undocumented immigrants. The Insurrection Act of 1807 grants the president broad authority to use armed force during emergencies to quell civil unrest or launch insurrections of their own, I guess. It's a huge blank check. It is easily subject to abuse. It's easy to imagine abuse. Harvard law professor and Presidential Reform Project leader Jack Goldsmith told NPR. Also, stop talking to Harvard professors for a little bit. Maybe call another university just for fun. Responding to Trump's comments, Harris Walls 2024 senior spokesperson and senior advisor Ian Sams wrote in a statement, Donald Trump is suggesting that his fellow Americans are worse, quote, enemies than foreign adversaries. And he is saying that he would use the military against them, taken with his vow to be a dictator on day one. Okay. I mean, I hate to yada yada the Harris Walls senior spokesperson's comment here, but I think you know where it's going. It should alarm every American. You're right. It should. What Donald Trump is promising is dangerous, and returning him to office is simply a risk Americans cannot afford. True, boring-ish sounding. How about this guy is an effing weirdo? I liked it when it was that. Instead, can you believe what he's saying? He's an absolute moron. You can't let him anywhere near anything. These guys are weird. But I don't know. Okay, whatever. Other Democrats, including Senator Richard Blumenthal and Jamie Raskin, he's not a senator, Representative Jamie Raskin, have been working to pass legislation that would reform the law and impose restrictions. But if Trump wins in November, it may already be too late. Oh, it might not matter because Trump will be ignoring the law. He's not interested in what the law says. But you'd like to erect barriers so that people feel bad about breaking the law occasionally. I don't know. Maybe someone will enforce it. Maybe there's a Brad Raffensperger somewhere that says, I don't feel legally entitled to do this, so we're not going to do it. And that helps. Historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat told NBC News that Trump's threats to curb dissent are out of the autocratic playbook. This is all true. I think at this point, well, actually, I'm almost done with the article, but I was going to say this is getting sort of repetitive and unnecessary. Other Democrats, right? Oh, yes. Ruth Ben-Ghiat. All autocrats consolidate their power once they're in office or on election day if they feel like it before they're in office. Anything that threatens their power or exposes their corruption or releases information that's harmful to them in any way becomes illegal, Ben-Ghiat said. And he's also threatened all of that as well. I'm done. There's only a paragraph left, but at this point, we've heard what we need to hear from this article. I mentioned to you that there were a couple other things we wanted to check in on and offer as evidence in all this. One, Washington Post reporting that I referenced earlier, hurricane recovery officials in North Carolina relocated amid report of, quote, armed militia, email shows. The story is not 100% clear on what did and didn't happen, what was rumored and what was witnessed. It seems a little weird, but of course you shouldn't be in this territory at all. The subheader here is safety fears are growing as misinformation collides with a large-scale federal recovery effort. Brianna Sachs is the reporter, and it goes like this. Federal emergency response personnel. It is dateline, by the way, Lake Lure, L-U-R-E, Lake Lure, North Carolina. Federal emergency response personnel on Saturday had employees operating in hard-hit Rutherford County, North Carolina, stop working and move to a different area. Bad, right? And this feeds on itself, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now the rumor mongers go and say, see, we told you FEMA was nowhere to be found. Well, they were here and they were working, and you threatened them, their lives, so they moved. Yeah, well, where are they? I don't care why they moved. Well, hold on. Don't say you don't care why they moved. You made them move. You threatened their lives. Some say yes, some say no. We just like genetics. We're interested in genetics. I don't know. It doesn't have anything to do with anything, but what the hell? It worked for Trump, right? So they moved them out of most of these areas in Rutherford County and moved to a different area because of concerns over armed militia threatening government workers in the region, according to an email sent to federal agencies helping with response in the state. Around 1 p.m. Saturday, an official with the U.S. Forest Service. What are they doing? Well, they're supporting recovery efforts after Hurricane Helene, along with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Where's FEMA? We can't find. They don't have enough workers. Well, that's fine. We'll send Forest Service workers to help them. Forest Service? Why do we even want them? Sometimes they may be that there's forest-related issues worth taking care of, whether that's clearing down trees across roads through federal forest land, possibly, or just go help FEMA, because, as important as it is to take care of our forests, right now the forests are doing fine. Go help people get food and shelter and recover from the storm. And then when you're done, come back and help take care of the forest. Whatever the reason is, they're there to help. So, an official with the U.S. Forest Service, which is supporting recovery efforts by FEMA, sent an urgent message to numerous federal agencies warning that, quote, FEMA has advised all federal responders in Rutherford County, North Carolina, to stand down. Who gave the stand down order? They stand down and evacuate the county immediately. Wow. The message stated that National Guard troops, quote, had come across, it says X2, 2 trucks. I don't know why X2. Why not just say 2 trucks? That's less keystrokes than X2. But okay, come across X2, or maybe twice have come across trucks of armed militia saying they were out hunting FEMA. Okay. The IMTs, that's incident management teams, have been notified and are coordinating the evacuation of all assigned personnel in that county, the email added. Really, have we lost control of Rutherford County, North Carolina, to militias at this point? Mogadishu, in western North Carolina somehow. Warlords are running Rutherford County. By the way, you would be saying, if this were Trump, right, if they had encountered what they thought were Venezuelan gangs, the story would now be, they've taken over Rutherford County, North Carolina. There's no federal control. There's no law and order in Rutherford County. But it's simply not being played that way for some reason. 2 federal officials confirmed the authenticity of the email, though it was unclear whether the quoted threat was seen as credible. The National Guard referred questions to FEMA when asked about the incident. And again, my first question, even though I do truly understand why they didn't do anything in particular about this, but my first question at the press conference, please clear this up. A group of armed militia thought that they were going to encounter a group of unarmed and untrained federal relief workers and beat them up or kill them. But instead they bumped into trained, militarily trained National Guard troops, whether they were armed for combat or not. No, they weren't. But then they sort of somehow said at that point, our thinking about possibly murdering federal aid workers has changed somewhat since the first group we encountered was the National Guard. But question, why, if you heard that, did you let them go? And the answer is they're not actually empowered to arrest and detain people, but you kind of wish in that case maybe that they were. Anyway, one Forest Service official coordinating the Helene recovery, said responders moved to a, quote, safe area, and at least some work in that area, which included clearing trees. See? I knew they would be doing that. Off dozens of damaged and blocked roads to help search and rescue crews, as well as groups delivering supplies, was paused. Good job helping your neighbors, everybody. By Sunday afternoon, personnel were back in place, said the official who spoke on condition of anonymity. So that's good news. The setback is one of the latest examples of growing concerns about safety and security in western North Carolina, where many of the towns were almost wiped off the map after the historic hurricane made landfall 2 weeks ago. You know about that. I don't mean to yada it, but we're pressed for time. In the weeks since, misinformation and rumors have made the recovery more difficult, targeting multiple federal agencies operating as part of the recovery. Federal officials such as the Secretary for Department of Homeland Security and FEMA's Director of Public Affairs have been the target of anti-Semitic attacks. Well, we did hear about that, didn't we? The Washington Post's story on that will provide all the details. I'll link to that one as well. Officials face anti-Semitic attacks over Hurricane Helene response. By the way, and this is helpful, the report finds that Elon Musk's X, that is Twitter, is fueling conspiracy theories that risk undermining rescue efforts and preparations for Hurricane Milton. So that was before Milton had struck, I guess. But yeah, now being singled out as Jews on posters, probably not going to help very much. And yeah, Elon Musk is out there accusing people of treason for not doing the things like confronting people who are threatening to kill them and forcing them to accept help from the federal government. All right. Well, let's see. So this is, of course, back to the original Washington Post piece. Chimney Rock, that one town that was very early on shown as being wiped off the map. They're totally erased what looked like at least the downtown area. Chimney Rock is in Rutherford County, and it's become one of the centers of tension and conflict after a rumor spread on social media. Does anybody know if Elon Musk has anything to do with social media? The rumor spread that government officials plan to seize the decimated village and bulldoze bodies under the rubble. Authorities and news outlets debunked the assertion, because duh, but people still took to social media imploring militias to go after FEMA. And just, by the way, for interesting contrast, right? I know these are different groups of people, but they are both Trump supporters. The first story we read was all about people who hear about Trump's plans to sick the military on his opponents and suppress riots and round up immigrants and maybe kill everybody and let the cops go crazy for a day. And I'll be a dictator for a day as well. Maybe it's the same day, maybe it isn't. Aren't you worried about that? Nah, I don't believe it. Well, okay. That's just rhetoric, it's just for publicity. Okay, but at the same time, Trump supporters all believe that they need to hunt FEMA because FEMA's real plan is to bulldoze the decimated village of Chimney Rock and bulldoze the bodies under the rubble and erase them and then steal all the lithium, which may or not even be there, and something. Do you believe that? Yes, I absolutely believe that. But no Democrats are saying, can't wait to bulldoze bodies under the rubble in North Carolina. By the way, it's not really rubble so much as piles of lumber, but okay. That, yes, we believe. But Trump is actually saying he wants to do all these things. Well, we think he's kidding. Okay. I don't think there's any getting around that with logic. A person familiar with FEMA operations who spoke on condition of anonymity said the agency is working out of an abundance of caution and its teams were operating at fixed locations, which actually kind of sounds like you need to be mobile more than anything else, and fixed locations and secure areas. So I guess they feel good about that. Instead of the usual practice of going door to door, FEMA continues to support communities impacted by Helene and help survivors apply for assistance, the person said. But for the safety of our dedicated staff and disaster survivors we're helping, FEMA has made some operational adjustments. The heightening tension has resulted in residents harassing federal employees, said Reva Duncan, former Forest Service official who lives in Asheville. Duncan, who's also a representative with the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters. And remember, we love them because they're first responders, but if they vote for the wrong people, we hate them and want to kill them, I guess. Has said people have been yelling at federal employees delivering aid or showing up to do repairs, saying, "We don't want your help here." One Forest Service employee, she said, was pulling into a gas station when someone yelled at him to leave, saying, "We don't want the government here." It's terrible because a lot of these folks who need assistance are refusing it because they believe the stuff people are saying about FEMA and the government. And it's sad because they're probably the ones who need the help the most. In a text message shared with the Washington Post, a woman said that her child, a Forest Service crew member from California, was one of those who temporarily left the county. Earlier Saturday, a resident came to a supplies distribution center, now largely run by the relief group, the Cajun Navy. This is interesting. Check this out, right? Cajun Navy. Who are those guys? Oh, yeah, right. Weren't they the ones who helped out in various disasters in Louisiana? Katrina, you name it. Any number of times, just private boat owners would go out and rescue people after a disaster and flooding, calling themselves the Cajun Navy. So they're just out to help you, right? Even if they are kind of conservative, wacky guys who love Trump, at least their hearts are in the right place. They go and help people. So they come up to North Carolina, we'll help people here. Well, hold on a second. So earlier Saturday, a resident came to a supplies distribution center, now largely run by the Cajun Navy, right? We're turning over things to them. Well, you run it then. If they hate FEMA, you run it. Is this a good idea? Why do I ask? Well, again, they're now running this relief station with the help of the Baptist church nearby, a Baptist church organization, I guess I should do. It could be from out of state. And they did what? What have they done with their time? They've threatened FEMA personnel who are also stationed there in a trailer, according to 2 Cajun Navy volunteers. So, all right, we'll have the Cajun Navy come in and help us, and we'll just sort of supervise, and they'll be the boots on the ground. And then they threatened us. But hey, their hearts are in the right place. Let's let them run relief efforts so that they can now bring supplies brought by FEMA to North Carolina. The Cajun Navy from out of state swoops in, puts the stuff in their boats, take it to people's houses, and when they say thank you, they say, by the way, this is no thanks to FEMA. Go kill them. Cajun Navy did this. We took the supplies that FEMA brought and moved them from one place to another, which no doubt a valuable service, but I'm sure they're telling people, I don't know whether they're telling people FEMA brought the materials or not, but they're telling people FEMA sucks. Great. Good partners. Lake Lure Police and Rutherford County Sheriff's Offices confirmed the incident. Sergeant Herbie Martin with the Spindale Police Department, located about 25 miles out of Lake Lure, was circling the parking lot Sunday afternoon. He also confirmed the incident, saying he, quote, hoped FEMA would come back. Great. Things are going swimmingly over there. All right, let's see. Other stories that I wanted to share with you. Let's get back to Pocket and find these other things. Oh, also, I guess I'll pull out the Blue Sky posts in which Elon Musk has been out there passing on the threats here. Yeah, I did see somebody say, where is this one? Peppermint Jack on Blue Sky saying it feels like it should be a bigger story where the world's richest man, who's also a critically important government contractor, by the way, used his social media platform to spread lies about a natural disaster and thereby incited threats of violence that forced aid workers to evacuate a hurricane-devastated county. You'd think that would be important. Here's what Elon Musk has been saying on Twitter. Just received this note from a SpaceX engineer helping on the ground in North Carolina. FEMA is not merely failing to adequately help people in trouble, but is actively blocking citizens who try to help by threatening FEMA people. The big help, that is. Yes, they are literally using your tax dollars, as Elon Musk is, to import voters and disenfranchise you. How did we get from disaster relief back to great replacement? I don't know. It is happening right in front of your eyes. It is not. And FEMA used up its budget, ferrying illegals into the country instead of saving American lives. Treason. No, none of that actually happening. But there you go. At least you get to hear what the world's richest man has to say about these things. All right. Let's see. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to put on the record, and they are where? Yes. Here is the story about Trump requesting military aircraft. Washington Post reporting this one the other day, just to get it on the record so you know it's on a part of what's going on here. So here's another rally picture from the second Butler, Pennsylvania rally. And once again, he's set people up on the grandstands behind him, I guess, to get shot by accident if that happens again, but it didn't. Trump requests military aircraft and vehicles amid Iran threat. There is no evidence tying Iran to 2 recent assassination attempts, but officials told the campaign that Iran is still plotting. This again reported by Josh Dawsey and Isaac Arnsdorf. Donald Trump's campaign requested military aircraft for Trump to fly in during the final weeks of the campaign. Billionaire can't buy enough security for himself, I guess. Expanded flight restrictions over his residences and rallies. Ballistic glass to be pre-positioned in 7 battleground states for the campaign's use, and an array of military vehicles to transport Trump, according to emails viewed by the Washington Post and people familiar with the matter. That was an interesting one. Now he has to do all those campaign stops behind ballistic glass, and it slows him down to have to travel with the same set of ballistic glass panels to wherever he's going. So why don't you just pre-position it in every state that I might visit in the closing days of the campaign so that it's easy for me to wing it and go wherever the hell I feel like instead of, coordinating security for myself. The requests are extraordinary and unprecedented. No nominee in recent history has been ferried around in military planes ahead of an election. But the requests came after Trump's campaign advisors received briefings in which the government said Iran is still actively plotting to kill him. That is worrisome. According to the emails reviewed by the Post and the people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity, of course, for reasons, Trump's advisors have grown concerned about drones and missiles, according to the people. In the emails over the past 2 weeks from campaign manager Susie Wiles to Ronald L. Rowe Jr., Rowe, R-O-W-E, head of the Secret Service, she expressed displeasure with the Secret Service. That'll get you what you want, of course. And maybe, now that we've heard that Alex Jones is out there broadcasting, well, maybe it would be good if they assassinated Trump for various reasons. Maybe Susie Wiles is one of these people, too. Secret Service, will you please help us, you miserable bastards who suck so badly? It's not a motivator, but okay. Maybe they don't care about motivating them. But she's expressed displeasure with the Secret Service and said the campaign recently had to cancel a public event at the last minute because of a lack of personnel from the Secret Service. Now, there's a difference between a lack of personnel as the Secret Service sees as being necessary and the level of protection you're entitled to as a candidate and the level of protection that they wish they had, thinking that they're still the president or, I want 100 million Secret Service agents. Well, we don't have that many. Well, then I express displeasure with you. But okay, complaining about the supposed lack of personnel, instead only putting Trump in a small room with reporters. They had to cancel the event. Boo-hoo. Wiles and Trump's campaign is being hampered in its planning because of threats and expects to hold far more events in the final weeks of the campaign, if he has the energy for it. She also wrote that the U.S. government has not been able to provide what the campaign views as an extensive enough plan to protect Trump. So what? Too bad. You lose. Representative Michael Waltz, a Trump ally who is on the House Intelligence Committee and the Butler Assassination Inquiry, remember they have one of those, wrote a letter to the Secret Service asking for military aircraft or additional protection for Trump's private plane, according to a copy of the letter reviewed by the Post. The fact that he wants to fly around on a plane that says, assassinate Trump by shooting this thing down in large letters on the plane fuselage, Well, we want a military escort for the plane as well. Fighter jets. I'm sure that makes him look cool in his mind. But no, that's just not a resource that's actually available for you. But we want it to be. Danielle Alvarez, a spokeswoman for Trump, declined to comment. Secret Service officials did not answer specific questions about the discussions with the Trump campaign, but spokesman Anthony Guglielmi, I think we've tried that name before, said in a statement that Trump is receiving the highest levels of protection. In a letter, because of course, in a letter to the campaign, Rowe said the government is assessing what can be provided. But one of the things the Secret Service doesn't have the ability to do, again, they'll make the demand regardless of the actual chain of command and real logistical abilities. Well, why doesn't the Secret Service, which is totally awesome, just like in the movies, why don't they just order the military to do this stuff? That's not the way it works. Assistance from the Department of Defense is regularly provided for the former president's protection. This is the spokesperson for the Secret Service, to include explosive ordnance disposal, canine units, and airlift transportation. The Secret Service is also imposing temporary flight restrictions over the former president's residence and when he travels, he added. Additionally, the former president is receiving the highest levels of technical security assets, which include unmanned aerial vehicles, counter-unmanned aerial surveillance systems, ballistics, and other advanced technology systems. Senior U.S. officials said it was unlikely the Trump campaign would be provided with military planes based on current intelligence. One official said the other request was still being considered, but there are limitations on how many places the Secret Service can have bulletproof or bullet-resistant glass positioned at one time, and that glass is already being provided for his rallies. We are doing everything we can do to take on the threats that are actionable and real, the official said. The official said the U.S. government was frustrated by the Trump campaign releasing statements that they feel politicized the briefings that the campaign was given on Iran. The requests were first reported on Friday by the New York Times. Former U.S. officials said they were unaware of any presidential nominee ever getting a military jet. Right? So it's a little unusual, to say the least. But what the hell? Ask for it and then complain about being turned down. One person who has served under multiple Republican administrations in senior roles said it would be extraordinary for the Secret Service to grant such a request. I don't even know how they would. They don't have military aircraft, do they? Maybe they do. Who knows? Trump's opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, receives protection from the U.S. Marines as the vice president and flies on Air Force Two, which is a military airplane, but she's actually an office holder. The Republican nominee has already started traveling. Oh, my goodness, I'm way late on the music here. Already started traveling with additional planes, and officials are also taking the precaution of providing his motorcade at times and putting Trump in nondescript planes that do not have his name on the side instead of his longtime 757 jet. The requests escalate a months-long battle between Trump's team and the Secret Service, which is heightened after 2 assassination attempts, sort of maybe, over against the former president. Granting such requests for a presidential candidate would be unprecedented. We already know that. Particularly a military plane to transport Trump. If the administration granted such assets, it could give Trump a distinct look in the final months that no challenger has ever had, and would remind voters visually every day that he's under threat. Trump and his team have grown frustrated with the Secret Service in recent months, even as they praise Trump's own security detail. The Secret Service has repeatedly escalated Trump's security, but not to the level the campaign wants, the people said. I want you to go out there and kill all the protesters. There's no evidence tying Iran to either of the recent assassination attempts, but the FBI hasn't ruled out the possibility of the connection. U.S. spies have determined that Iran's leaders are seeking to take revenge for the killing of Qasem Soleimani, of course. The FBI declined to comment on its ongoing investigations. But we are out of time on this article, even if we're not out of information, although I suspect we're kind of at the end of the useful information here as well. Time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From VeteransRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what we got on tap for you. A MAGA Republican official in Pennsylvania who removed scores of drop boxes gets what she deserves. Ooh, let's find out what that is when we tune in next. Stay tuned right here for the rest of the news from around the country and around the world. Yeah, they'll be touching on those officials who removed personnel in North Carolina, too.